10 minutes before the wedding, my daughter told me I would not be the one walking her down the aisle, and the worst part was not the sentence itself. The worst part was the way she said it, carefully, evenly, with the tired softness people use when they have already discussed you somewhere else, and have only come to inform you of the final decision. I was standing in the hallway outside the sanctuary at First Baptist in Plano, holding a small white corsage in my left hand, the stems wrapped in satin ribbon, the florist's pin tucked beneath the little flap of tissue paper. I had picked it up myself that morning from a shop on Parker Road because I wanted something simple for Emily, not too large, not showy, just white roses and a little greenery, something her mother would have liked. The woman at the counter had smiled when I told her it was my daughter's wedding. She had said, "Big day," and I had nodded like a fool, because at that moment I still believed the day belonged to both of us in some small sacred way. I still believed that whatever had been happening around me for months, whatever small humiliations and late exclusions and polite dismissals had gathered in corners like dust, the walk down the aisle would remain untouched, because some things were too old and too human to be negotiated away. The hallway smelled of waxed wood, old hymnals, perfume and flowers that had been delivered too early, and were already beginning to warm under the Texas heat leaking through the glass doors. Inside the sanctuary, the organist was testing the opening notes, soft at first, then fuller, the sound swelling through the walls and trembling faintly in the floor beneath my shoes. Guests had already taken their seats. I could hear the faint folding of programs, the low murmur of relatives greeting each other, the scrape of dress shoes against polished pews, the occasional laugh quickly lowered because everyone knew they were in a church and wanted to behave like people worthy of the clothes they were wearing. Emily stood in front of me in her wedding dress, white and clean and almost painfully simple, the kind of dress she had shown me on her phone months earlier when she still called to ask what I thought and still acted like my opinion had a place in her life. For 1 second before she spoke, all I saw was my little girl trying not to cry in a dorm parking lot at 18, and before that a 9-year-old carrying stolen bread to ducks, and before that a 3-year-old in pajamas standing at the foot of my bed after a thunderstorm, trusting without question that I would make the room safe again. "Dad," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "we need to change something." I waited. Weddings come with changes. Anyone who has paid for one learns that fast. Flowers arrive wrong, cousins bring extra guests, musicians forget names, someone decides the table numbers look cheap, and suddenly the man writing the checks is expected to treat napkin color like a moral emergency. So I waited, corsage in hand, thinking she was going to tell me the aisle song had changed, or the photographer wanted me to stand somewhere different, or the schedule had shifted by 5 minutes. Then she lifted her face, and I saw she had practiced. I saw it in the stillness around her mouth. I saw it in the little controlled inhale before the blade came out. "You're not walking me," she said. For a moment the hallway did not make sense. The words were ordinary. They were made of sounds I knew, but they did not enter me in order. They landed like loose hardware dropped on concrete, scattered and metallic, impossible to assemble into meaning. I blinked once. "I don't understand." Behind her, Linda stepped closer, not all the way forward, just enough to be included without seeming responsible. My wife had always been skilled at that, standing near a decision she had shaped, and then pretending she was only present for support. Her dress was navy, expensive, flattering, selected with the kind of care she never admitted to taking. Her hair was done, her makeup perfect, her face composed into a strained sympathy that did not reach her eyes. Emily swallowed. "Ryan's not comfortable with it." "Ryan," I said. I did not raise my voice. It came out flat, because my body had already learned something my mind was still refusing to accept. "Ryan is not comfortable with me walking my daughter down the aisle. He thinks it might look off," Emily said, and as soon as she said it, her eyes flicked to Linda just briefly, like she needed confirmation that she had used the right wording. "Look off how?" Emily shifted her weight, the hem of her dress whispering against the polished floor. She had always done that when she was cornered, even as a child, moving slightly from one foot to the other as if the ground beneath her might offer another way out. "Just not the image he wants." Linda let out a breath through her nose. "David, please don't turn this into something." I looked at her then. "Into something? It's a ceremony," she said, smoothing the front of her dress though it did not need smoothing. "Emily can walk on her own. Lots of modern brides do. It doesn't have to mean anything. It means something if it was decided 10 minutes before the doors open." Linda's expression tightened, not because she was ashamed, but because she disliked being contradicted in front of Emily. Don't act like you matter so much here that the entire day has to bend around you. That one did not echo. It did not need to. It entered cleanly and stayed. I looked back at Emily, waiting, because even then, even after the sentence, some part of me still believed my daughter might flinch. I wanted to see her reject it. I wanted one small movement, one flash of regret, one sign that the woman I had raised was trapped inside the woman standing in front of me and was trying to get out. But Emily's face did not change. She looked tired. She looked frightened. She looked guilty, yes, but guilt is not the same thing as loyalty. Guilt can stand there and let something happen. Loyalty cannot. That was when I noticed the man behind them. He was standing 3 or 4 steps back, near the side door to the sanctuary, mid-60s, maybe older, with silver hair, a pressed charcoal suit, and hands folded in front of him like he had been given instructions and was waiting for his cue. He did not look confused. He did not look surprised. He looked ready. No one introduced him. No one explained why he was standing there. They did not need to. He was a man selected for optics, a better shape in the photograph, a cleaner symbol, someone who looked like the kind of father Ryan wanted in the frame. I glanced down at the corsage in my hand. White roses, small and neat. It had no place now. That was the detail that almost did it. Not the sentence, not Linda's face, not even Emily's stillness. It was that foolish little corsage, prepared for a moment that no longer existed, sitting in my hand like evidence that I had misunderstood my own life. I cleared my throat. "Okay," I said. Emily nodded quickly, and the speed of her relief hurt more than an argument would have. Linda stepped back, satisfied, the way a person steps away from a stove after confirming the flame has caught. I did not look at either of them again. I turned toward the side exit. The organ swelled inside the sanctuary, bright and solemn, as if the building itself had decided to continue without me. I pushed open the door, stepped outside, and the sound cut off the moment it closed behind me. The heat hit first. Texas heat does not ask permission. It does not ease you into discomfort. It simply lays itself on your shoulders and reminds you that the world outside your humiliation has not changed at all. The parking lot shimmered under the late afternoon sun. My truck had been sitting there for hours, and when I opened the door, the trapped air rolled out thick and stale, smelling faintly of leather dust and the peppermint gum I kept in the console. I rested my hand on the steering wheel and pulled it back quickly. It was almost too hot to touch. I got in anyway and sat with the door half open, one foot on the asphalt, the corsage still in my hand, watching people cross the lot toward the church entrance with wrapped gifts and bright faces, smiling, adjusting ties, carrying themselves with the gentle nervousness of guests arriving just in time. Everything looked exactly right, except for the fact that I was no longer inside. I closed the door and leaned back. The heat pressed against me. Sweat gathered beneath my collar. For a while, I did not move. I looked at my own reflection faintly in the windshield, the same face I had shaved that morning with more care than usual, the same man who had signed deposits, taken calls, arranged payments, moved money, answered questions, solved problems, and tried not to make himself burdensome during the most important day of his daughter's life. The same man, apparently. They needed only until the work was finished. I reached over and turned on the radio because silence felt dangerous. Static cracked first, then an old country song came through, one I used to hum when Emily was small and I drove her to school before the morning traffic got heavy. She would sit in the passenger seat with a backpack nearly bigger than her torso, hair still damp from a rushed shower, sometimes falling asleep against the window, because she trusted I would get her where she needed to go. That trust had been effortless then. It had asked nothing of me except presence. I listened to the song for a few seconds, then turned it off. The quiet that followed was not empty. It was clear. My hand moved to the inside pocket of my jacket. The folder was still there, flat against my chest. I had not planned to use it that day. That is what I told myself when I placed it there that morning. I told myself it was just habit, caution, the old business owner in me unwilling to attend any event without documents tied to major money transfers, trust structures, and unfinished property matters. But men lie to themselves most convincingly when they are afraid of what they already know. I had been carrying that folder because some part of me had understood, weeks before the hallway, that something in my family had shifted from neglect into strategy. I sat up, adjusted the mirror, and looked straight ahead through the windshield. The church doors opened and closed. Guests disappeared into the building. The world had not stopped. It rarely does. I nodded once, not to forgive anyone, not to dramatize anything, but to acknowledge a fact finally made visible. "All right," I said quietly. "I understand." I did not call Mark Benson right away. People expect men to react immediately when they are humiliated. They imagine slamming doors, storming into sanctuaries, making speeches that guests remember for years. That is not control. That is bleeding in public. I am 58 years old. I have buried a wife. I have raised a child. I have built an HVAC company from nothing but a used service van, a box of tools, a cracked phone, and a back that started hurting every winter after I turned 45. I know the difference between pain and action. Pain wants noise. Action wants timing. So I sat there and let the ceremony begin without me. While I sat in that hot truck outside the church, I did not think first about the money. I did not think about the house in McKinney, or the trust documents, or the deposits, or the checks written under pressure and dressed up as love. I thought about Emily at 18. Standing beside the open tailgate of that same Silverado in a university parking lot in Denton, trying to act like leaving home was nothing. August heat had made our shirts stick to our backs. We had her whole life stacked in plastic bins, a mini fridge, a laundry basket full of towels, a box fan, shoes, notebooks, and a framed picture of her mother she pretended she had packed by accident. Linda had been in my life then only a year. Emily's mother, Carol, had already been gone 3 years. Taken by cancer with the speed and cruelty of something that did not negotiate. Emily kept saying, "Dad, I'm good, seriously, don't make it weird," and then cried in the dorm parking lot anyway. She laughed through the tears, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and told me she was not crying because she was scared. I told her I believed her. She punched my arm, and we ate burgers in the truck because the dining hall line was too long. She told me she wanted to study marketing because she liked understanding why people bought things they did not need. I told her that was dangerous knowledge. She grinned and said she would use it responsibly. That was my girl. At least that was the version of her I had kept protected somewhere in me, untouched by later evidence. For years after Carol died, Emily and I were close in a way that did not require many speeches. We were not a family that said emotional things every 5 minutes. We showed up. That was our language. When her car broke down outside Abilene during a summer internship, I drove 4 hours with a toolbox and a cooler of bottled water. When she got the flu her junior year, I brought soup and sat in her apartment while she slept on the couch. When she graduated, I clapped until my palms hurt. When she called crying after her first real job review because her manager said she was not assertive enough, I listened without telling her how to fix it, which was harder for me than fixing an entire rooftop unit in July. When she met Ryan McAllister, I tried to be happy because she sounded happy, and fathers who have known grief too closely try not to distrust happiness when their children bring it home. Ryan was 34, clean-cut, corporate sales, medical software, Dallas office, good teeth, sharp hair, expensive watch. The first time I met him was at a steakhouse in Frisco because Emily said he liked nice places. I wore a button-down shirt Linda picked out, though I would have been more comfortable in a polo. Ryan stood when I arrived and shook my hand firmly. He looked at my palm. Men who have worked with tools have hands that tell on them. His eyes registered the calluses before his mouth smiled. "So you're in HVAC," he said. I answered. "Sold most of the company last year. Still consult a little." "That's honest work," he said. There it was, polished enough to pass as respect if challenged, angled enough to leave a mark if understood. Emily did not seem to notice, or maybe she noticed and chose not to. Linda loved him from the beginning. She liked his shoes, his watch, the way he knew which wine to order without looking uncertain, the way he used phrases like long-term positioning and social alignment, as if ordinary life were a product launch. Linda had always wanted life to look a little shinier than it was. She used to tell me, "David, you're a good man, but you don't understand presentation." Maybe she was right. I understood invoices, payroll, health insurance, replacing units for widows at cost because their husbands had served with my father, making sure my men had water in the trucks during heat waves, and never sending a technician into a crawl space I would not crawl into myself. Presentation was not my strongest skill. Loyalty was, or I thought it was. The wedding planning began about 10 months after Ryan proposed. In the beginning, Emily called me constantly. She asked about venues, church availability, guest lists, catering costs, flowers, music, whether a plated dinner was worth the extra money, whether it was ridiculous to pay that much for photography, whether an outdoor reception in Texas was asking for heat stroke. She would laugh and say, "Dad, why does everything triple when you add the word wedding?" I told her because fathers are emotional and easy to rob. She laughed at that too. Then Linda became involved. She did not take over violently. She was too skilled for that. She moved in gently, with folders and smiles and the language of relief. "David," she said one evening at the kitchen island, sliding a binder toward herself as if organizing it was a kindness, "just let me handle the money side. You hate paperwork anyway." "I ran a business for 30 years, I said. "I don't hate paperwork." She waved her hand. "You know what I mean. Wedding paperwork, vendor calls, color palettes. Let Emily enjoy this, without feeling like every receipt needs your approval." Emily sat beside her, chewing the inside of her cheek, eyes on her phone. "It would help, Dad. You get stressed." "I get stressed when costs move without explanation." Linda smiled like I had proven her point. "Exactly. It sounded reasonable at the time. That is how displacement works when it is done by people who know you well. It does not come as a shove. It comes as relief. One small task removed from you for your own good. One meeting you do not need to attend. One decision already handled. One phrase repeated until it sounds normal. We did not want to bother you. We knew you would say yes. Ryan thought it would be easier. Mom already took care of it. Pretty soon I was not part of the planning. I was the funding source that received occasional updates. A deposit for the church reception hall. A photographer from Austin. Catering. Flowers. A band Ryan insisted was classier than a DJ. A honeymoon package Emily said they might modify later. Then came the house. They called it a starter home, though nothing about a 4-bedroom house in McKinney with an updated kitchen, media room, and stone patio looked like any start I remembered. Ryan said renting was throwing money away. Linda agreed before I even responded. Emily looked at me with those eyes she had used at 18 and said, "Dad, it would help us start right." So I helped. That is the sentence men like me use to hide 1,000 smaller mistakes. I helped. I put in money toward wedding costs. I moved funds connected to my old HVAC company, still settling after the sale. I tied part of the property arrangement to a family trust Linda, and I had structured years earlier because I had assets from before our marriage, and Emily was my only child. My attorney, Mark Benson, had insisted on safeguards. I had contributed about 70% of the value tied to that trust. Linda teased me for keeping receipts. "You and your little folders," she would say. I smiled and let it pass, but I kept them. The worst part was not the money. Money can be earned, lost, recovered, replaced. The worst part was how quickly I became background noise. Emily and Ryan picked the menu without me. Then the music. Then the seating chart. When I asked about the father-daughter dance, Emily looked away and said they were still thinking. Later, Linda told me there would not be one because Ryan felt dances like that made receptions drag. I should have spoken then. I should have placed both hands on the table and said no, not to the decision, but to the pattern. Instead, I told myself weddings were stressful. I told myself Emily was overwhelmed. I told myself fathers should not be needy. I told myself 100 small lies because the truth would have forced me to act before I was ready to admit I had become a guest in my own family. 3 weeks before the wedding, I walked into the garage and heard Ryan's voice through the half-open kitchen door. "We don't need him anymore," he said. "He's done his part." There was no laugh afterward, no correction, no offended silence, just Linda's low murmur and Emily saying something I could not hear. I stood beside the garage freezer, holding a box of filters I had brought in from the truck, and felt something inside me shift out of place. I did not enter the kitchen. I did not confront him. I went back outside, placed the filters in the truck bed, and sat there for 20 minutes with the engine off. That was when I first started carrying copies of my papers. Now the church bells were ringing behind me, and my daughter was inside, beginning a ceremony I had paid for and been removed from. I drove away with no destination, no rush, just the road in front of me, and enough silence to think without Linda's voice smoothing over the sharp edges. I turned out of the church parking lot, went east on Parker Road, and blended into late afternoon traffic like any other man leaving any other building. A few lights later, I passed the turn that would have taken me home. I kept going. I merged onto US 75 heading north. The highway opened into long concrete stretches, sunlight flashing across windshields, brake lights blooming red, trucks growling beside me. I had driven that route more times than I could count for service calls, supply runs, emergency jobs that could not wait because Texas heat makes breakdowns personal. About 20 minutes later, I took an exit without planning it and ended up near a small park in McKinney. It had a pond, a few walking paths, a chipped playground, and a bench I recognized before I understood why. Emily had called it our spot when she was 9. She had stolen half a loaf of bread from the pantry because she insisted the ducks needed it more than we did. Carol was still alive then, thin from treatments, but smiling more than she admitted she could. Emily talked the entire time about school, a boy who cheated at tag, and how she was going to be in charge of everything when she grew up. "You already are," I told her. She believed me. I parked under a tree and cut the engine. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, then again. Missed calls, messages, numbers I recognized from the wedding. I let it sit. After a minute, I picked it up and scrolled to Emily's name. My thumb hovered over it. I could still call. I could ask her to step outside. I could ask her to explain it slower. I could tell her she did not have to go through with anything that felt wrong. Then I pictured her in the hallway. Not confused, not pressured. Certainly. I locked the phone and set it down. "Not today," I said. The folder came out of my jacket. Plain manila. Nothing theatrical. Inside were copies of wire confirmations, trust summaries, transfer records, email printouts, invoices, contribution notes, property documents, and the legal structure Mark had advised me to maintain even when everyone else thought I was being old-fashioned. Paper tells the truth when people do not. I flipped through the pages, not because I needed to read them again, but because I needed to feel the weight of facts. This was not a tantrum. This was not revenge. This was structure finally being used for the purpose it had been created for. The phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Mark did not waste words. "You okay?" "I'm standing," I said. "That's about it." "Where are you?" "McKinney. Park off El Dorado." A pause. "You still at the wedding?" "No." Another pause, shorter this time. "What happened?" I told him. Not every detail, not every word, just the hallway, the decision, the man waiting behind them, Linda's sentence, Emily's face. Mark did not interrupt. He had been my attorney for 16 years. He knew when a client needed legal advice, and when a man needed to get the first layer of poison out of his system without being rushed. When I finished, he said, "All right, we are not reacting to this. We are going to handle it. I'm not trying to start something. I know. That is why we do this, Klein. I don't want to hurt her. I understand. She's still my daughter." "I understand that too," he said. "But right now, David, she is not treating you like one." That landed harder than I expected. I looked at the bench. "Walk me through it." Simple version. Funds contributed toward the wedding. Anything clearly gifted and documented as a gift, that is likely gone. I know. Funds moved through business accounts. Funds tied to pending obligations. Funds not formally documented as gifts, we can review. And the house, the McKinney property, is not finalized in the why they think it is. The trust structure gives you control, or at minimum leverage. We can pause transfer, initiate review, and restrict access to funds until ownership interests are clarified. So we can stop it. We can slow it down, he corrected. Force a proper review. Make them answer with documents instead of assumptions. I rubbed the back of my neck. "Mark, I am not going after them." "No," he said. "You are stepping back and taking your part with you. That is different and it is defensible." "How long?" "Give me a couple of hours." I looked across the water. "All right, David." "Yeah." "You ready for what this does?" I thought about the hallway again, about Emily's practiced voice, about Linda's sentence, about the man waiting to take the place I had carried in my heart for 28 years. "I didn't start anything," I said. "I'm just not ignoring it anymore." He said he would call back, and the line went quiet. By the time I started the truck again, The ceremony was already underway. Somewhere inside First Baptist, my daughter was walking down an aisle without me. People were standing, music was playing, cameras were recording. A moment that most fathers get only once had become something I could view only from a distance, if I chose to view it at all. I drove slowly. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Filed. I did not respond. Another message came a minute later. Accounts flagged. Temporary holds in place. I exhaled long and slow. I was not smiling. I was not shaking. It felt like tightening a loose bolt that should have been tightened months earlier. I stopped at a red light near a strip mall with a nail salon, a dry cleaner, and a diner I had visited years ago between calls. A couple crossed in front of me holding hands, older than Emily and Ryan, younger than me, smiling in a quiet, uncomplicated way. My phone buzzed again. Property transfer paused. Title review initiated. That one mattered. I turned into the diner parking lot and killed the engine. Inside, the place smelled of coffee, old grease, and grilled onions. A waitress in her late 50s, with a name tag that read Carol, came over with a pot before I opened the menu. Just you? Yeah. She poured coffee without asking. People who have worked long enough with the public can read a face. You want anything to eat? Maybe later. She nodded and left me alone. I wrapped both hands around the mug. It was too hot to drink, but I needed something solid to hold. Across the aisle, a couple sat in silence looking at their phones, present but not connected. I wondered when my own house had become like that, people occupying rooms while something essential thinned between them. Another message from Mark. You will get calls tonight. Do not engage emotionally. Let me handle legal. Understood, I typed. Then, against my better judgment, I opened the wedding livestream. Emily had shared the link earlier that week for relatives who could not attend. The camera angle was fixed near the back of the church. I saw the altar, rows of guests, white flowers, warm lights, and Emily standing beside Ryan. She had walked alone. No one beside her. Not the silver-haired man. No replacement. Just empty space. For a second, I did not understand. Then I realized it might not have been about replacing me with another man. It might have been worse. It might have been about removing the symbol altogether, so the image belonged only to Ryan and Emily, clean, modern, self-made, with no visible debt to the father who had funded the frame. The officiant was speaking. Marriage is not simply the union of two people, but a commitment witnessed by family and community. I almost laughed. The camera shifted slightly, and I saw Linda in the front row, smiling tightly. Ryan delivered his vows smoothly, as expected. He was good in front of people. Then Emily spoke. Her voice wavered at the first sentence. Most people would not notice. I did. She glanced out at the crowd once, quick and searching, then steadied herself. I closed the stream. That part was not mine anymore. The first call came from Linda at dusk. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then answered. What is going on? She demanded. No greeting, no hesitation. Evening, Linda. Do not do that. Do not act calm like this is not insane. Mark Benson contacted me. Accounts are frozen. What did you do? I made adjustments. Adjustments, she repeated, voice rising. On our daughter's wedding day. Our daughter's wedding day, I said slowly, was the moment I was told I do not matter. That is not what happened. You were standing there. She was under stress. You were standing there, I repeated. Linda exhaled sharply. David, you are overreacting. This is embarrassing. People are going to hear about this. People already saw enough. They just do not know what it meant yet. You need to fix this. I am. By freezing accounts. By putting things back where they belong. You are hurting Emily. I looked down at the coffee cooling in front of me. No, I am no longer absorbing the hurt for her. Silence. Then quieter, Linda said, what did you expect? That she would do everything your way forever? No, I said. I expected respect. She did not answer. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. This is not over. I know, I said. That is the point. I ended the call. At 7:30, Mark called from my house. I had parked a few blocks away, because I did not trust myself to be under the same roof with them while the first wave landed. He was at the kitchen table. I could hear voices, movement, the scrape of papers. They're here, he said. Walk me through it. I have the documents laid out. Notary is present. Linda, Emily, Ryan. Ryan is trying to look calm. That almost made me smile. Who's talking? Linda, mostly. Of course. Her voice came faintly through the phone, sharp and strained. Where is he? Mark replied in his professional calm. David asked me to handle this on his behalf. Emily's voice followed, softer but tight. Mom, what is he talking about? Mark continued. Funds contributed toward the wedding and the McKinney property are being formally reviewed. Until that process is complete, access to certain accounts has been limited. That money was given, Linda snapped. Some was, Mark said. Some was not formally documented as a gift. Ryan cut in. Hold on. Are you saying we cannot access our own money? I am saying certain funds are under review. This is ridiculous. We just got married. We have plans. We have a house. The property transfer is paused pending title review. There was a silence so complete, I could hear it through the line. Understanding had entered the kitchen. Not remorse, not yet, just fear wearing a new face. Emily spoke. He wouldn't do this. Her voice held doubt. I closed my eyes. Put me on. There was movement, then Emily was closer. Dad, I'm here. What is this? What are you doing? I let the question sit long enough for her to feel that I would not rush to comfort her. I did this the moment you told me I did not matter. This is my wedding day, she said, and now the hurt in her voice was real because consequences had made it real. I know. You are really doing this now. I am not adding anything new. I am stepping back from what was never fully yours to begin with. That's not fair. I supported you. There is a difference. Linda jumped in. This is punishment. No, I said. If it were punishment, it would look very different. This is correction. Ryan's voice came through, controlled and edged. Look, David, we can fix this. Whatever this is, miscommunication, paperwork, emotions running high, we can sit down after the honeymoon and sort it out. Just lift the hold and we will move forward like we planned. And you'll what? He stopped. You'll move forward like the plan still includes me. No answer. You had a man waiting in the hallway and a daughter prepared to tell me 10 minutes before the ceremony. Do not tell me I was part of the plan. Emily's voice broke. I thought you would always be there. There it was. Not cruelty exactly. Something more common and maybe more devastating. Assumption. She had built her confidence on the belief that my love had no boundaries because I had never shown her where they were. I said. You stopped seeing me. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Mark came back on, gentle but firm. These are temporary measures. We can discuss resolution after review. Tonight is notice, not final judgment. I looked up at the darkening sky through my windshield. That's enough for tonight. The next weeks were not dramatic in the way outsiders imagine family collapses are dramatic. There were no smashed plates, no public shouting, no scene in the driveway. The damage moved through email threads, legal notices, bank calls, title reviews, and clipped conversations where every sentence had consequences attached. That made it worse in some ways. Loud fights leave you exhausted but certain. Paper fights leave you awake at 2 in the morning reading the same paragraph again and wondering how love became terminology. Linda became colder than I had ever seen her. Not louder, colder. The first time I returned to the house after the initial notice, she was in the kitchen, removing her crystal glasses from the upper cabinet. She had wrapped each stem carefully in paper towel, as if even objects deserved more gentleness than she had extended to me. You humiliated me, she said without turning. I stood by the doorway. I did not do anything in public. You think people do not know. You think Emily's friends did not notice the tension. You think Ryan's family has not asked questions. I think you are more upset about being seen than about what happened. She turned then, one glass in her hand. Do you know how exhausting it has been, David, living with a man who thinks paying for things makes him noble? I studied her face. 15 years of marriage, and suddenly I could not tell whether she believed what she was saying or only needed it to be true. I never thought paying made me noble. No, you thought it made you necessary. That struck closer than I wanted to admit. She saw it. Linda always saw small wounds quickly. Her mistake was assuming seeing them gave her the right to press. You wanted Emily dependent on you, she continued. You wanted to be the quiet hero forever. Ryan saw it. That's why he wanted a cleaner ceremony. He wanted your control out of the picture. I nodded slowly. And the money. Her mouth tightened. That part of my control was acceptable. You are twisting this. No, I am finally putting the pieces in order. She set the glass down too hard. It rang against the counter. You will lose her. I may have already lost her. For pride. For respect. She laughed once, bitter and small. Men always rename pride when it costs them something. I left before I said something I could not take back. That was the first pressure cycle after the wedding. The house still looked like home, but every familiar object had become evidence in a case neither of us could fully win. The kitchen island where Emily once did homework, the hallway where Carol's old photograph still hung, because Linda had never liked it but had not dared remove it. The guest room where wedding boxes were stacked. The quiet made everything accusatory. Emily did not call for 12 days. During that time, Mark updated me almost daily. Some wedding funds were gone, formally paid and unrecoverable. I accepted that. Some transfers were ambiguous enough to review. The trust structure held. The McKinney title transfer would not complete without my consent, or a negotiated restructuring. Ryan sent 2 emails through an attorney friend, both written in the polished, faintly threatening language of a man trying to sound more powerful than his position allowed. Mark answered each one with documents. Documents have a way of lowering men like Ryan into silence. On the 13th day, Emily texted me, "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding. "Yes." She called immediately, as if she had been waiting with the phone in her hand. "Dad," she said, and then nothing. I sat on the edge of a motel bed, because I had stopped sleeping at the Plano house by then, and had not yet found anywhere else. The room smelled of detergent and old carpet. The television was muted. "I'm here. I don't know what to say." "Then start with the truth." She breathed unevenly. "Ryan is angry. I imagine he is. He says you are trying to ruin us." "What do you say?" A pause. "I don't know." I closed my eyes. "That is honest, at least. He keeps saying you planned this, that you were waiting for a reason. Were you waiting for a reason to remove me from the aisle?" She did not answer. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Emily, I need you to understand something. I am not asking why Ryan wanted what he wanted. I know enough about Ryan's. I am asking why you agreed." Her voice tightened. "It was complicated." "No, it was painful." "That does not make it complicated. He said it would be cleaner. He said with Mom and the trust and everything, people might think the wedding was about money. He said walking alone would look independent. He said if you walked me, it would look traditional in a way that did not fit us." "And what did you think?" "I thought." She stopped. "What did you think?" "I thought you would be hurt but forgive me." There it was again, clearer this time. Not hatred, not even indifference. Something almost worse, because it had worn the face of love for years. She had counted on the elasticity of my forgiveness. She had built the day around the assumption that I would absorb the injury, because absorbing injury was what I had taught her I would do. "I probably would have," I said. She was silent. "If you had told me a month before, if you had sat down with me and said, 'Dad, this is what I want, and I know it hurts you, but I need you to hear me,' I would have hated it. I would have gone home and sat in the dark, but I would have shown up. I would have sat in the front row. I would have loved you through it." Her voice was barely there. "I know, but you did not ask. You managed me. There is a difference." She began to cry then, quietly at first, then harder. Once that sound would have pulled me out of any room, any meeting, any sleep. I would have driven across counties to stop it. But sitting on that motel bed with the hum of the air conditioner above me, I discovered grief has a second stage nobody talks about. First, it breaks your heart. Then, if it is repeated often enough, it teaches your heart to stop volunteering for the same wound. "I'm sorry," she said. "I believe you. Can you undo it?" There was the turn, soft, almost hidden, but there. "No." Her crying changed. "Dad." "No, Emily." "But the house is under review. We already gave notice on our list." That was premature. Ryan says if this falls apart, we'll lose deposits. I know. Dad, please. The word please scraped something raw inside me, because I had waited years to hear it used for something other than money. I am not your emergency fund anymore. She went quiet so suddenly I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Is that what you think I am? I think you have been taught to reach for me when something needs fixing and look away when I need dignity." She hung up without saying goodbye. That was the second cycle, the apology that became a request, the guilt that became pressure. The daughter I loved and the woman she had become overlapping so painfully I could not separate them without cutting myself. Ryan tried the public route next, not openly. Men like him prefer reputation attacks that can be denied later. A mutual acquaintance called me to say he had heard I was having a hard time emotionally, that the wedding had triggered something, that perhaps I was not adjusting well to letting Emily go. A cousin texted to ask if I was okay, because Linda had implied I was making rash financial decisions. Someone from church left a voicemail saying they hoped I was getting support. It was clever in a cowardly way. If I defended myself too loudly, I looked unstable. If I stayed silent, the story traveled. Mark advised restraint. Let them talk, he said. Paper will outlast gossip. But gossip has teeth. I felt it when I went to the grocery store and saw two women from church pause near the produce section, their voices dropping as I passed. I felt it when a man who had once worked for me called and asked if I needed anything in a tone that meant he thought I might be unraveling. I felt it when I opened an email from Ryan's attorney suggesting mediation would be preferable given concerns about my recent emotional volatility. I printed that email and placed it in the folder. Then I called Mark. "Enough," I said. He understood immediately. "I will send the documentation packet. Not everything. No, just enough." Just enough meant contribution records, trust terms, title status, and a written statement that I was represented, competent, and not to be contacted, except through counsel regarding financial matters. It did not include the hallway. It did not include Linda's sentence. It did not include my daughter's voice. Some humiliations do not belong in legal exhibits. They belong in the part of a man that goes quiet forever. The packet changed the temperature. Ryan's attorney stopped using the word volatility. Linda stopped implying. Emily did not call. 6 weeks after the wedding, the settlement was nearly complete. I recovered roughly 2/3 of what I had contributed. I did not press for more, though Mark said I could. "You have the position," he told me. "If you want to push, we can push. I do not want to win." "What do you want?" I looked around the motel room that had become too familiar, at the suitcase still half packed, at the folder on the desk, at the framed photo of Carol and Emily I had taken from the Plano house before Linda could decide it was communal property. "I want to finish it." Linda moved out of the Plano house without a scene. That bothered me more than a scene would have. She arranged movers, labeled boxes, took crystal, furniture, clothing, art, and left behind anything that could not support the version of herself she wanted to carry forward. On her last day, I came by to sign a few documents Mark had left. She was standing in the foyer beside stacked boxes, holding her purse, looking around with the cool assessment of someone leaving a hotel room. "Emily will come around," she said. I looked at her. Is that comfort or strategy? Her face hardened. "You always think the worst of me now." "No," I said. "I think accurately. That is new." She opened the door. For a second she looked older, not fragile, just stripped of the flattering light she preferred. "You could have let it go." "I did," I said. "I let all of you go." She left without answering. I sold the Plano house 2 weeks after everything was finalized. It was too large, too polished, too crowded with rooms where old versions of my life had gone to die slowly. The buyer loved the kitchen. His wife loved the high ceilings. Their children ran through the hall laughing, and I felt no tenderness toward the sound. I signed the closing documents with a steady hand. I moved into a smaller place near Lake Ray Hubbard. 2 bedrooms, a back porch that caught the evening breeze, a garage big enough for my tools, and a view of the water if you stood at the right angle. Nothing about it was impressive. That suited me. At night, the house settled quietly around me without demanding performance. I bought a used kitchen table. I made coffee in the mornings. I played golf twice a week with men who understood that silence was not always loneliness. Sometimes it was recovery. Sometimes it was just the absence of people asking you to be smaller. Then one Thursday morning, Emily called. I was sitting on the porch with coffee, watching pale light spread over the lake. Her name appeared on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Hey," I said. A pause. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded smaller than memory, not younger, smaller. "How are you?" "I've been better. I figured." Silence. Wind moved across the porch screen. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked and then stopped. "Can we talk?" she asked. "We are talking. I mean in person." I looked out at the water. "Pick a place." We met the next day at a small coffee shop in Rockwall, mid-morning, neutral ground. She was already there when I walked in, sitting near the window, both hands around a paper cup she had not drunk from. She was not wearing her wedding ring. I noticed that immediately, but I did not ask. Some facts do not need help entering a room. She stood when she saw me. For a second, she looked like she might hug me, then stopped, uncertain of the rules now that old assumptions had been revoked. I sat across from her. We talked about weather, traffic, the lake, safe topics, cowardly topics. Then she looked down at her hands. "I was stupid," she said. I watched her fingers twist together. "No." She looked up, hopeful, and that hope hurt, because I knew I was about to remove it. "You were ungrateful," I said. "There is a difference." Her face tightened. She nodded slowly. "I know." We sat in that truth for a while. A barista called out someone's order. A spoon clinked against ceramic. Life continued with its ordinary cruelty. "Ryan and I are separated," she said. "I assumed." "He blamed me for everything. Then he blamed Mom. Then he blamed you." He never once said he was sorry for what he said, or for pushing me, or for making me feel like I had to choose an image over my own father. I said nothing. I let him, she continued. "That's the part I keep coming back to. I keep wanting to make him the villain because it would be easier. And he was awful. He is awful. But I let him. I heard him say things about you. I heard Mom agree in softer ways. I knew it felt wrong. I knew it. And I still stood there in that hallway and said it." Her eyes filled. I did not reach for her hand. "That restraint cost me more than she will ever know." "I thought you would always be there," she whispered. "I was. I know." "No," I said gently. "You know now. That is not the same thing." She looked down. "What happens now?" she asked. I drank my coffee. It had gone lukewarm. "Now we move forward carefully. Can we be okay?" The old May would have said yes. Quickly, automatically. I would have given her relief because I loved her, and because fathers are trained to mistake their children's comfort for healing. But the man sitting in that coffee shop had watched a church door close behind him. He had sat in a truck while his daughter got married without him. He had learned that love without self-respect becomes a place where other people store their selfishness. "I don't know," I said. She flinched. "That is the honest answer. I love you." That did not stop. But something broke, Emily, and I am not going to pretend it did not, just because pretending would make this easier. Tears slid down her face. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed. "I understand. I hope you do." When we stood to leave, she hesitated again. This time I stepped forward and gave her a brief hug. Not long, not dramatic, just enough to acknowledge blood without erasing damage. She held on harder than I did. I let her. Then I released her first. After she left, I sat back down and finished my coffee. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel healed. I did not feel like a man restored to his rightful place. That is the lie people want from stories like this. They want the father to reclaim his dignity and the daughter to learn her lesson, and the ending to warm itself around forgiveness. Real life is colder. Dignity, once reclaimed, does not give back what humiliation took. It only keeps the next wound from entering the same way. I drove back toward the lake with the windows down. The road stretched open and familiar ahead of me. I passed a church, a florist, a park where a father was pushing a little girl on a swing. She laughed every time she came forward, trusting the hands behind her to be there again and again and again. I kept driving. At home, I placed the folder in the bottom drawer of my desk. I did not throw it away. I did not need to look at it every day, but I needed to know it existed. Some men keep photographs, some keep medals, some keep old letters. I kept paper proof of the day I finally stopped paying for my own erasure. That evening, I stood on the back porch and watched the light drain out of the lake. The house behind me was quiet, not lonely exactly, not peaceful either, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when a life has been stripped down to what can no longer be taken without permission. I did not lose my daughter completely. I lost the version of fatherhood that believed love meant standing still while people moved you out of the frame. I survived the wedding. I survived the calls. I survived the settlement. I survived the coffee shop. But survival is not the same as restoration. Something in me remained outside that church, holding a white corsage that no longer belonged anywhere, listening to music cut off by a closing door. And every time my phone rang after that, even when it was Emily, even when her voice was gentle, even when she was trying, my first feeling was no longer joy. It was measurement, distance, caution, the permanent arithmetic of a man who has learned exactly how much love can cost when it is given to people who assume it has no limit. If you have ever been pushed aside by your own family, you know how quiet that kind of hurt can be. It does not always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives dressed in white, 10 minutes before a ceremony, spoken by someone you once carried through a storm. Sometimes the only way forward is not to fight louder. Sometimes it is to step back, take your name off what no longer respects you, and live with the cold knowledge that standing on your own side may save your dignity while leaving your heart exactly where it was broken.